Remember when Metroid Prime 4 was announced? It was such a different time. The Switch was in its infancy, E3 was a public event, and Despacito was topping the charts. As for me, I was in the hotel room and woke up the entire building to my thunderous cries of happiness. Back then I thought, no, I knew that I would be playing Metroid Prime 4 by now, the year 2022. But 3 years ago to the day, on January 25th, 2019, my dreams were crushed when I saw those words, Metroid Prime 4 Development Update. When Nintendo announced that they were taking Metroid Prime 4 away from its previous developer, which was rumored to be Bandai Namco, and giving it back to the series' original creators, Retro Studios, who would be starting the entire project over from scratch. Look, it's great that Nintendo restarted the development in order to ensure the game lives up to expectations. It really showed that in spite of fans claiming otherwise, Nintendo actually cared about Metroid, and was willing to scrap years of work in order to get Prime 4 right. I understood this 3 years ago, but I was still absolutely destroyed. I've already waited 12 years for this game. I couldn't bear the thought of waiting any longer. Of course, I had no choice but to be patient and keep waiting. But you know, I spent those next few years theorizing when we would finally see Metroid Prime 4. Even last year, I thought we would see the game potentially released in 2022. However, the unthinkable happened during E3 2021. Yep, the long-awaited Metroid Dread was revealed and released last year. This was originally a Nintendo DS game rumored all the way back when Metroid Prime 2 was released. After years of no official announcement, we Metroid fans gave up hope for it until Nintendo shocked us with that title drop during E3 2021. Turns out, the game was initially cancelled in the past, but Nintendo rebooted it in 2017 with Samus Returns developer Mercury Steam, and the rest is history. All of this before Metroid Prime 4, too. Metroid Dread was the continuation of the mainline series that fans have been wanting for 19 years, and it was the conclusion to that story. The best part? It was great, receiving critical acclaim from multiple outlets and fans. It even was nominated for Game of the Year at the Game Awards and won Best Action Adventure. It served as a glorious return for the Metroid series, and thank God for its release, because if I went another year without anything Metroid, I would have totally lost it. Perhaps Metroid Dread affected the timing of Metroid Prime 4's development. This is mere speculation, but maybe Nintendo wouldn't have scrapped Metroid Prime 4 if it wasn't for Metroid Dread. Either that, or they would have rushed Retro Studios to get the game done sooner. Regardless, Metroid Dread's development began after Samus Returns came out in September 2017. So it's likely Nintendo was more confident in rebooting Metroid Prime 4 once they considered that another highly anticipated Metroid game was going to release in a few short years. In a sense, Metroid Dread was a way bigger deal than Prime 4, as it was a game thought to have been cancelled in the mid-2000s, not to mention it was the first 2D Metroid in almost 2 decades. That was the conclusion to the mainline series. Some might have thought Dread was something to hold fans over until Metroid Prime 4, but to others, it was the main course. As for me, let me put it this way. Metroid Dread is my Avengers Infinity War, and Metroid Prime 4 is my Avengers Endgame. Dread is my Super Mario Bros. 3, Prime 4 is my Super Mario World. Dread is my Terminator, Prime 4 is my Terminator 2, you get the idea. While I still loved Metroid Dread and gave it a glowing review, the Metroid Prime trilogy is what made me adore the series to begin with, which is why Metroid Prime 4 is a bigger deal to me. Heck, it might even wind up being a bigger deal for the Metroid series as a whole. What do I mean by that exactly? Well, let's look at Metroid Dread again. If you think about it, it doesn't have the most widespread appeal in the modern gaming space. It's a 2D side-scroller that's designed to be played multiple times, and it's being sold for a fully priced $60. That doesn't mean it wasn't met with resounding sales success, being the 11th best-selling Switch game of 2021, but it's still a fairly niche game, mostly targeted at Metroid fans, Nintendo fans, and old-school gamers. Contrast that with the Metroid Prime games, which are 3D, first-person, and have stellar visuals. If Metroid Prime 4 is going to be anything like its predecessors, it could be more popular than Dread. First-person games in this generation tend to sell very well, whether they're multiplayer-based or exclusively single-player. An online multiplayer in Metroid Prime 4 could theoretically benefit the sales, but even then, these past few years have shown that amazing single-player experiences can make a huge impact, especially on Switch. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, for example, is the best-selling Zelda game in the series, due largely to it being on the successful Nintendo Switch, but also because it changed a ton of established conventions in the Zelda series. It's set in a boundless open world where players can climb and glide everywhere, tackling missions in any order they please. They can even go straight to the final boss at the beginning. The development team took a lot of risks with Breath of the Wild, and it paid off in spades. It also helped that fans were waiting for this game for an extremely long time, and Nintendo was holding this game's details close to their chest until E3 2016, 9 months before its release, kind of like another highly anticipated game of theirs. At least during the wait for Breath of the Wild, we got some brief gameplay snippets. Meanwhile, we haven't seen a screenshot of Metroid Prime 4, and it's been 4.5 years since the JPEG title reveal. I'm kidding, it's more like a PNG. But I would love to see a trailer for Metroid Prime 4 in the MP4 format. The years of hype for this game will surely help its success, but not if the gameplay doesn't live up to the cosmically high expectations. As a Zelda fan, my expectations for Breath of the Wild were through the roof, and yet that game exceeded them by offering revolutionary open world and gameplay design. Keep in mind, I'm not saying at all that Metroid Prime 4 should necessarily go open world, I'm just making the observation that Metroid Prime 4 could be as impactful for Metroid as Breath of the Wild was for Zelda. It all depends on what Retro Studios has planned. Personally, I wouldn't mind if this game merely matches its predecessors in quality without doing anything out of the ordinary. But something tells me that Retro Studios has something more in store, especially after witnessing how games like Breath of the Wild enraptured the world and realized that they'd have to go the extra mile to make Metroid Prime 4 truly spectacular while still remembering why we play Metroid games in the first place. I could go on about what I hope to see in Prime 4, but I actually made an entire video about that, so feel free to check it out when you're done watching this. Now for the big question we've been asking for years. When will Metroid Prime 4 be released? If you asked me this before June 2021, I would have said holiday 2022. However, thanks to Dread being a palate cleanser for Metroid fans, Prime 4 is probably getting more time in the oven. That, and Nintendo is having a stacked 2022. With games like Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Splatoon 3, Mario Rabbids Sparks of Hope, and the Breath of the Wild sequel. This is why I don't see a 2022 release happening at all. Metroid Prime 4 needs its own spot away from these huge Nintendo juggernauts in order to sell well. Metroid Dread's biggest competition last year were 2 Pokemon remakes and a Mario Party compilation, so it wasn't exactly endangered. This leaves 2023 and 2024. But this actually makes guessing the release date even harder, because now I'm starting to think that at this point, Metroid Prime 4 will be a dual console release on Switch and Nintendo's next system, whatever that may be. It's like when Breath of the Wild released on Wii U and the Switch. It depends on if Nintendo sticks to their home console cycles of 5 to 6 years, and we know they don't always keep to tradition. All I know for sure is that Metroid Prime 4 sure as heck ain't coming out in 2022. In fact, let's compare Metroid Prime 4's development to another game with a similar cycle, Breath of the Wild. This game took over 5 years to come out after 2011's Skyward Sword. being first discussed in a January 2013 Direct, then officially revealed at E3 2014, demoed at the Game Awards, delayed in early 2015, teased again later that year, delayed again in early 2016, had an E3 blowout that year, and was finally released in March 2017. If my math is correct, Metroid Prime 4's development is at the stage Breath of the Wild was right before its E3 2016 blowout. However, Breath of the Wild's development wasn't restarted like Metroid Prime 4's, so we're really around the E3 2014 reveal. It's also important to note that Metroid Prime 4 might not take the Breath of the Wild route and be set in a boundless open world with complex puzzles and physics, so it's possible development won't actually take that much longer from here on out. Also, Metroid Prime 4's rebooted development has taken less time so far than Breath of the Wild 2, which presumably started in late 2017 after the release of the Champion's Ballad DLC. If we want to be more accurate, let's compare Prime 4's development to the previous Metroid Primes. However, the first one is the exception, as it took over a year to develop, with the last 9 months of work being excruciating crunch time. Senior game designer Mike Wicken said in an interview with the YouTube channel Kiwi Talks that the last 2 Prime games did not have crunch because of this. Metroid Prime 2 came out 2 years after the first game, and Prime 3 took a bit longer at 2 years and 8 months. Hey, that means that Metroid Prime 4 is done and ready to ship, as it's been 3 years since Retro started development. Right? Not exactly, because games nowadays are generally much more complicated to develop than they were in the 2000s, now that devs are dealing with more advanced graphics, physics, and other tools that my non-game developer brain can barely understand. Not to mention, Metroid Prime 4 is the first Metroid Prime game in over 15 years, and there's probably just a little more pressure to ensure it delivers, hence it being rebooted in the first place. Surely Retro Studios is going back to the drawing board for parts of gameplay to bring Metroid Prime 4 to a new generation of gamers. They probably won't reinvent everything about Metroid Prime, but they might take more creative risks that'll hopefully pay off. And it takes time to implement these features through playtesting and various experimentation. This is why Metroid Prime 4 isn't out yet and probably won't be out by 2022. But that doesn't mean fans shouldn't potentially be excited for this year. For as long as the Switch has existed, there have also existed rumors of a Metroid Prime Trilogy compilation coming to Switch before Metroid Prime 4. That would make sense, seeing as a large portion of the Switch's audience have not played these games. So why not catch them up with an HD re-release? Well, recently, these rumors turned from a Metroid Prime Trilogy HD report to a full-blown remake of the first Metroid Prime in order to celebrate the game's 20th anniversary this year. And at this point, I fully buy it. And I will buy it. Probably multiple times, but I digress. When there's smoke, there's fire, and there's been smoke for years. There would be no better time for an HD remake of Metroid Prime than during the game's 20th anniversary. We saw this with The Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword, as they all got HD remasters on their 10th anniversaries. Although I would prefer an HD remaster of the Metroid Prime trilogy, I will take as much Metroid on Switch as I can get. This is why I'm confident that 2022 will be the year of the Metroid Prime remake, with Prime 4 following in 2023 or 2024, possibly alongside a next-gen Nintendo console. I could be totally wrong about that, but having a new Metroid game launch with the successor to one of Nintendo's most popular systems sounds like it could only benefit the Metroid series. Who knows? Because at the end of the day, I'm just a Metroid fan, staring at the Metroid Prime logo, asking it for some gameplay footage. Maybe someday. In conclusion, all we know is that Retro Studios has been hard at work on this game for about 3 years now, and that's pretty much it. However, since the reboot announcement, they've hired some grade A talent. Just recently, they hired a lighting artist from DreamWorks Animation and a storyboard artist from Rooster Teeth of all places. We made a video in 2020 detailing the new employees at Retro Studios, and we're going to update it with the even newer hires they've brought on since then. So if the new version isn't up yet, feel free to check out the old one. Anyway, when do you think Metroid Prime 4 is going to release, and do you believe the rumors of a Metroid Prime remake? Let me know in the comments below, and check out the videos on the right for more topics you might be interested in. Until next time, bye.